So I'm Corley Phillips. I'm the chairman of Sierra Forward. Sierra Forward is focused on getting the partisanship out of politics and getting back to fact-based and science-based policy. And we're focused on promoting candidates that feel the same way across the spectrum. And I want to shout out to our donors. So thank you for your support, because your support allows us to do things like this town hall, which we're going to kick off here right now. So welcome to the second of our town halls, second of what is going to be a series of these events. And I just want to let you know, I think you probably got an alert when you joined that we are recording this, so that we're going to be able to make the recording available later. And also, if you have questions, we will be taking some audience questions, but the way to do that is there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and put your questions there, because that's what I will be looking for questions. The chat, if you want to use chat, is to talk to your fellow folks about anything you want to talk to, but that's not where we'll look for questions. So hopefully that you get the ground rules. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Elizabeth Betancourt. Elizabeth brings a great perspective on politics in Shasta County as a candidate in the area. And she's going to give you that perspective and then introduce our speaker. So take it away, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much, Corley. It's really an honor to be hosting and facilitating this conversation with Doni, and I'm really pleased to be here tonight. So I am Elizabeth Betancourt. I live here in Shasta County and am a board member with the Sierra Forward organization. And Corley, I was actually looking for a way to share links, but I don't know that the chat is a way that we can communicate with folks on the webinar. So if you're able to do that, that would be awesome. Link to Sierra Forward and maybe a link to a news cafe as well. That would be super helpful. Awesome.
Sorry, I'll put that in the chat, a link to Sierra Forward, a link to News Cafe. So, okay.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Corley. So yeah, I am going to share just a little bit about Shasta County, the history up here. I know Doni has a lot more under her belt to share. And then some of my experience as a candidate. I recognize some of the names in the attendee list. Really pleased to see you here in this space again, virtually at least. So many of you know that Shasta County and actually the whole North State actually has a pretty progressive history. In the early 1900s, they voted socialist for Eugene Debs for president, and the dam workers' presence in building Shasta Dam up here really had a strong Democratic leaning throughout the 1930s and 40s. Subsequent to that, though, it was progressively less progressive with the influx of Orange County Republicans in the 1970s and 80s due to lower living costs up here compared with the South Coast. And then in the 1980s, the Spotted Owl and Timber Wars and the decimation of the timber industry on which so much of this area relied really kind of sealed the deal for anti-democratic sentiment in the region. And then I would say the subsequent exclusion of rural America from democratic politics since then has not helped at all. Certainly, we're hoping to turn that around, but rural America has largely been ignored for the last several decades. And so it's gotten more and more conservative, and probably we would use the terms tonight, the ultra-conservative or alt-right movement, because certainly conservative is fine, but when it gets to the space where violence and the whole spectrum of authority coming out of control in the area, it's a very different picture. And so we'll get a little bit of that tonight in our conversation with Doni. So I ran for office for Assembly District 1 in 2019 and 2020 when the Trump impact was in full effect, but people were still generally civil. The Trump loss, though, in 2020 seems to have resulted in a more openly hostile, ultra-conservative movement in the county. We have some compounding challenges in the region, including local militia, law enforcement, enforcement, and even the DA's office, which is, of course, the entire spectrum of where our civil rights would be protected, all have affiliations with the ultra-right wing. And that alt-right and ultra-conservative movements are not just vocal here. They also have the backing of billionaires from around the nation. So they do have the tools, from money to social media presence, to do real damage in the region. So with that setting, understanding what's happening around us is extremely important. Local news and journalism is extremely important for that reason. So we're really pleased to present this forum to you this evening. Doni has been active in reporting the news up here for decades, and has run a news cafe since before I moved here, at least, so more than 10 years. For those who haven't visited, a news cafe is just what its name suggests. It's a local hangout to learn more about what's happening in the community. The website is subscription-based, or I shouldn't say subscription-based. It's open to everyone, but operates based on subscriptions.
Yes.
And we really appreciate that it pulls no punches in giving the real story of our elected and appointed leaders and the impacts of their decisions and actions. Doni, if you haven't seen it, we really should provide some links to the articles. Doni has been recognized internationally for her work here in the North State, with features in newspapers from San Francisco to New York to London. She has, though, which we'll talk about tonight, also paid a price for her work. Threats to her property and her life, as well as actual physical assault last month. What I want to encourage you to do while you listen to Doni this evening is to think about what it must feel like to be in her shoes. Please imagine her experience. We want you to ask questions. What does it mean when our journalists, who are held above the fray in everything from politics to war internationally, what does it mean when they are physically threatened here at home? What does it say about our communities, and what does it do to the people we rely on to keep us informed? So we are so grateful to have Doni and a news cafe in our community, and so grateful that Doni, you've been able to set aside time to be with us tonight. So please take the floor, Doni.
My pleasure. Thank you, Elizabeth and Les and Corley and everyone who's registered tonight. I'm just honored to be here and to tell my story, and I hope if you have questions, you'll ask them. Elizabeth, you did a great job describing Shasta County's political history, so I won't go over that much, but just say that I started out as a newspaper reporter in the late 90s, and I was one of those re-entry students, so I was late to the game. And back in those days, I was a features writer, and I did the food section, and I was the first opinion columnist at the paper, and it was kind of cool because I was a woman, so the first opinion columnist who happened to be a woman. And things could be contentious then, and I got my share of hate mail, but the threats were, just threats, empty, and nothing ever happened to me. But over the years, I left the paper 16 years ago. They were doing downsizing. It was right during the recession and the Great Recession. And so the paper did a slash and burn and got rid of a lot of reporters. I was a senior reporter. So 16 years ago, I started a news cafe with my son, Joe, who sent me a little link. And I said, I hate online. I'm more of a paper person. And the site grew and grew and grew with participants. And I tried the whole newspaper model of doing paid advertising. I'd get dressed up and go out and beg for advertising. But now, as Elizabeth mentioned, I love this model, which is voluntary subscribers. We have people who give $1.35 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, 20. We have a couple who give 100, and then we have one very, very generous, I call him our angel donor, who all of whom allow us to continue and have reporters reporting. I think in Shasta County, things started taking a turn for the kind of scary and ultra conservative after then President Trump lost, and then you had COVID-19, and then in 2020 with the announcement that was basically a world pandemic. And then you had George Floyd's murder. And here in Shasta County, there was a protest shortly after George Floyd was killed. And that to me was a real turning point because although I've lived here my whole life since I was 5, and I'd heard rumblings about the militia, I didn't know what that looked like. Even though I was a reporter, I just never saw them. But for that peaceful protest, there were more militia and friends of militia who showed up than peaceful protesters. And I called it the militia coming out party. And they were armed. Some people brought baseball bats. The head of the Cottonwood militia, his name is Woody Clenendon, he was quoted in a story saying the only time he's not wearing a loaded weapon is in the shower. And I know a lot of his followers believe the same. And we have board meetings where, you can see the outlines of people carrying weapons. But that night, when you could see people with militia members and friends of militia with fighting gloves and bats, that was a turning point for me. And then after that, they became much more vocal. And then in Shasta County, there was a group of people, some of whom were in the militia, who started what was called the Red, White, and Blueprint here. And it was well funded by a son of a billionaire named Reverge Anselmo, and who had his own axe to grind with Shasta County. And that's too long to go into, except that he's angry at Shasta County and he wants revenge. And so he's funded many candidates here in Shasta County. And I look at it like a pirate ship. We had just a regular ship here in Shasta County with a little bit of this, a little bit of that, Democrats, Republicans, nothing crazy. But now I feel like our mostly peaceful ship has been taken over by pirates, school boards, water boards, board of supervisors. And when that happens, they can change the complexion and landscape of a community, which is what's happening here in Shasta County. And I recently had, like I mentioned, in fact, I just had my first ever lawsuit as a journalist. I've been a journalist for 30 years. And in my 16 years with the News Cafe, I'd never been sued. I always tell reporters, this is not a good week to be sued. Just tell the truth. That's the defense for libel, right? Or slander, tell the truth. But there was a person who had a radio talk show on a conservative station here, and he called for my public execution and hanging, called me a communist. I should be dragged behind a car. It's the only way communists and social, I'm putting that in air quotes, socialists and communists and Marxists like me learn. And we wrote about it. And then he sued us for defamation for writing about it. So we countersued and we won. So I thought that was the last of my court days. But on July 6th, Elizabeth mentioned this, I went to a meeting out in Cottonwood, and it was organized by a militia member, attended by many militia members, and it had been posted as public on Facebook everywhere. Things like, patriots, concerned citizens, business owners. I mean, I ticked a lot of the boxes, and plus I'm a journalist. And so I went, and I was the only media there, and I was demanded to leave. And I just held my ground and said, I'm just going to stand against this back wall, back and center, as I like to say, and just do Facebook Live. And one of the guys who's part of the group, in fact, he's a treasurer for a lot of the money that comes in from Reverge and Selmo. I'll show you my camera strap. I have a camera strap that I wear around my neck. And so he grabbed my phone, and it was like being hanged by my own camera strap. And when he did that, my head snapped. And as a result of that, I had a concussion, whiplash, and pulled ligaments. So that was a turning point for me, because I'd been to many, many protests and places where I was cursed and yelled at and called fake news and yellow journalism. And I always felt somehow foolishly protected by my notebook and a pen and a recording device. And reporters, as I always like to say, is reporters report the news. We don't make the news. We're not supposed to make the news. And I would stand there and just observe and then report. And I, by now, had picked up a number of enemies who didn't like a news cafe, who did not like what we were writing about the militia and about Red, White, and Blueprint. And so I thought I was protected. And at this meeting on July 6th, that was a turning point, because not only was I assaulted, but a group of them circled me. I was like the hole in a donut. And literally would not allow me to lift my camera, which was still attached to my neck. They wouldn't allow me to see. They blocked my face. And I actually later thought about, why didn't I scream or why didn't I ask for help? But I was not in a friendly, there was not one person there who I think would have come to my aid. Somebody from the group called 911 and said that I was a trespasser, and 4 deputies showed up in 3 cars in an area where it's a rural area where they always complain about how they have no law enforcement response. And they ordered me out. And I later told one of the deputies, I said, I wish that I had held my ground. I wish I'd said, no, I'm not leaving. I have a right to be here as a journalist. It's my First Amendment right. It's a public meeting. There are 2 supervisors here. But he said, had you done that, then you would have been put in our car and taken to the jail and arrested. So that's where it is in the state of journalism right now. And the thing is that I've had some people say, well, what the heck were you doing there? I mean, I know that I'm unwelcome in many places, but the day that journalists only go places where they're welcome is a bad day. There are many times we go to places where we're not welcome, but that's not what it's about. In fact, the more seemingly dangerous a place is to go, it's less likely that a regular citizen will go there. People say to me all the time, I would never go there. And I go, well, you don't, but I go so you don't have to. So that's basically in a nutshell, from beginning to where we are now.
Doni, that's so intense.
It is intense.
I can't imagine that feeling, and just really appreciate you as a public servant and the service you're providing to people here in Shasta County as well as the rest of the North State.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well, I know we have a few questions coming through, but I think one of the questions that's probably on most people's mind is it viable for you to continue? What makes you keep going? And if you aren't able to continue for personal safety or health or whatever reason, just sanity, what happens if you're not able to continue? What does that mean for our community from your perspective?
I wrestle with that a lot, and I've had family members who've been upset with me about why I continue going. I went to a meeting after this, more as an observer, when I was still wearing my neck brace, and got a lot of taunting from the other side. But like, why do you put yourself through this? And I'm brave, but I'm scared at the same time often. But, ask anybody in a job that's dangerous if it's possible to be brave and scared, and it is. But I was really touched the other night. My twin said to me, because she's often the first person saying, don't go, it's dangerous. And she said, I get it. I get that you do what you do because it's your job, that it's your journalist, because you're a journalist. I'm not happy about it sometimes, but I get it. And so I don't know how sustainable it is. I mean, I'm hoping that was an isolated experience, except for the fact that after that happened, I watched the video of the meeting, which I never got to really see. And when the guy who assaulted me, by the way, his name is Mark Kent, I don't mind saying it. When he re-entered the room, people were applauding him, patting him on the back, high fives, hand clasps. And so there were 200 people there, and not one person stood up to say that what had happened was wrong. So that to me is another turning point. This just wasn't one angry man. This is a group of people who applauded what he did. And so it makes me nervous about myself as a journalist, the journalists who work for me. I've had people suggest that I even hire, and I actually considered this. I had this guy who's a progressive karate instructor, and we talked about him going to meetings, not with me. I don't want an entourage. I don't want bodyguards. That's weird. But he could just be in the meeting. But then I thought later, what if that night this karate guy had seen what was happening and came up and approached? I'm afraid he would have been shot. So I'm not willing to put anybody else's life at risk that way. I'll be honest, I haven't written a word since that happened. I've been pretty rattled, quite honestly, and it's I have some great reporters and journalists who are kind of keeping things afloat while I'm a little bit underwater. And I don't plan on stopping being a journalist. I have my property is fortified. I live in downtown Reading. I have a huge front gate that I just had put up on my driveway and a huge back gate. I have cameras. I have peepholes. I mean, I've made myself as safe as I can be. I use Uber, but at some point, I hate to say that the other side could win if it becomes a matter of public safety. I don't know the answer. I can't predict the future. I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing and hoping that I'll be okay doing it.
So Donnie, there were a number of essentially follow-up questions here, which is, are there any legal remedies for what happened?
Mm.
Is the DA going to do anything? Should the FBI be notified? What potential legal remedies are there?
Corley, that's an excellent question. Of course, I filed charges, and the sheriff's department it took a week for them to compile everything for their report, my medical records, my statements, and then everything was passed on to the district attorney's office. I hope she's listening. And that's where it's waiting. It's waiting for her. I do have representation by one of the most well-known personal injury law firms in Shasta County, who gladly took me on as a client. But that doesn't count the First Amendment stuff. That's not considering the part where I was basically held captive for 23 minutes in the circle. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with the DA. I hope that she presses criminal charges, and we'll see what happens then.
Thanks, Donnie.
And here's another one. This one is from Michael Taylor, and it says, with the rise of misinformation and fake news, how do you believe local journalists can rebuild and reinforce trust within their communities? And are there strategies that can be used elsewhere?
Well, that's a good question. At a news cafe, we have 6 journalists, and 3 of us do journalism, news / opinion. And then the other 3 are hard, straight news, just the facts. So all I can do as a journalist when I go out and report is report, who, what, where, why, how, what I see, what I hear, what I observe, what I can read. All I can do is do that, and then I do add my opinion often, which is what's gotten to me into so much trouble. But if we can show in our reporting, like kind of showing your work when you're doing math in school, show your work. If we can show our work and show our sources and show our links, but part of the problem is that now people are so fearful. One of the things that happened with this red, white, and blueprint situation was there was a former Marine named Carlos Zapata who got up early on and threatened the Board of Supervisors over COVID. And he said, we're not going to take it anymore. They have militia. And later on, they said, we know your name. We know your dog's name. We know where you live. So there's a lot of intimidation. So trying to get sources to go on the record, even confidentially. So it's hard to write a story that looks factual if you have no sources on the record. And if I say this is a confidential source, they say, how do we know? How do we know that's a credible person? I don't know how to prove that except to show my track record. And if we make mistakes, we print corrections. I take it very seriously. Every spelling error, I take it all very seriously. So I don't know how, unless they can just read what we have written and find that we're trustworthy, that we tell the truth, and we fess up when we've made a mistake. That's all I can do.
Cool. So there's a number of comments along the lines of, how can we support you? And earlier on, you mentioned this is a subscription-based service. So if you go to anewscafe.com, you can subscribe, and that is one way to support her activity.
Right at the top, it says subscribe. And honestly, as I'm sure with you, you'll see something, it's a great headline, and you'll click on it, and there's a paywall. And I tried paywalls briefly back in the day. And my theory is that a free press should be free. And so I believe that I'll keep it free. And if people read it and like it, then they can help support it. And the day that I start losing subscribers in droves and I can't support myself and other reporters and video people is the day that I say, okay, the people have spoken, and I guess I'll close a news cafe.
Well, thanks. And there was also, are you assembling a legal defense fund?
No, I have this sort of visceral reaction against, and I've contributed to many and I've written about many, like, GoFundMe's, but just, I'm just resistant to that. I'm just hoping that justice will prevail and I won't need to do that. The law firm I'm working with now, it's on a contingency basis, so I don't have to pay. You know, they get money if I get money. And you can tell I'm kind of scrambled about this. I'm really good at research, and just have kind of a blank spot when it comes to this. I don't know what to do. I I'm just kind of flummoxed. I really am. So I guess I better get on the ball and start being more serious about finding legal avenues to pursue the violations that have been committed against me.
And somebody just, but for clarification, the guy that assaulted you has yet to be charged, correct?
That's right. No charge. And he's walking around, going to meetings, still has his radio show where he talks about liberal snowflakes and Marxists and communists and just, and I actually, we talked about places this could take place across the country or in the world. And I think when you have media like a conservative, ultra conservative radio stations, and then they have these people who have radio shows, I think that has been one of the greatest causes of the ultra conservative uprise in Shasta County. They have their audience, and that's what makes it so scary when you have someone on a radio show calling for my public execution and being hanged. He may not do it, but he may have some followers who think that's a good idea. It's like the perfect storm. You have a son of a billionaire, you have these radio talk shows, and I don't think there's anything progressive up here to mirror that. I don't think so, that I can think of. Can you, Elizabeth?
No,
Maybe
just a
Lynn
few
Fritz or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're not yeah, they're good at what they do, and they're good at making a plan, and they do have a blueprint, and the blueprint is working, I'm sad to say.
Mm-hmm. To that end, Doni, I'm curious about hearing about your history in journalism, because you've been in journalism in a lot of different kinds of forums, from what you're doing now as a business owner, where you get to determine how you tell a story and what kind of perspective you bring to that, or your journalists, to the Record Searchlight, which is the paper of record, I would say, for the North State. And I wonder how it's different to report in those different spaces.
Well, I did, I worked at the paper for 10 years. I never had any aspirations to be an editor, a publisher. I just wanted to be a writer. Writing is what I do. From the time I was a kid, if I was upset about something and didn't know what it was, I would literally get out a piece of paper and start writing. So writing is my medium kind of thing. It comes easy to me. But, oh, 1 second. Sorry, I have somebody back here who says my umbrellas are blowing over. I'll get to it later. Sorry about that. So, anyway, so at the paper, it was much more structured. And right now it's owned by USA Today. And a news cafe has more reporters than the Record Searchlight, which is sad. It's really sad. I mean, I'm glad, I'm proud, but it's terrifying to me. They don't have a building anymore. The presses are gone. They've been melted down for something. So, and I know the reporters who work there, and I think they're awesome, and they're doing the best they can with very few resources. And when that happens, then it's like a tree falling in a forest kind of thing. If stuff happens in Shasta County or anywhere, militia are doing things, or meetings where they're planning to do something and nobody's hearing about it and nobody's reporting on it, then the public doesn't know. At that meeting where I was assaulted, and I saw the video, Jesse Lane, who's the militia member who called the meeting, he said, you know what? We're like a bunch of splinters. Remember back during the protest, how we were all together, united, had the same goals. And then since then, we've all kind of splintered apart. I think what we should do is get those splinters together, make a big 2x4, and then beat the hell out of them. Well, them is people like us. And that's scary. I used to think it was just figurative. Now I'm not so sure.
So there was a nationwide coverage about Marion County, Kansas, where a local newspaper was, among other things, investigating the local sheriff, and that
Right.
resulted in the police coming in and confiscating everything they needed to put out a newspaper.
Right.
That they did get the newspaper out by finding some old computers and rewriting everything they had written. And apparently the DA there locally has now told the police that was an unreasonable search and they need to return all that. Any analogies? Can you compare and contrast
Well,
what just happened in Marion County to Shasta County?
I wasn't surprised. I was listening to an NPR interview today with the publisher and one of the reporters, and the reporter said, the sheriff came in and yanked the phone out of my hand. I thought, oh, I've had that happen. And I thought was interesting was the whole reason the sheriff was there to confiscate all this material was because they were investigating him. They hadn't even written a word yet. And that's why even it isn't just reporting that's dangerous, it's the investigating to report on something that can be dangerous, because if they get wind that they're being investigated or that something might come up that they don't like, and they can stop you before or intimidate you. I've been, threatened. If you publish that, you'll be sorry, that kind of stuff. And I'll do it anyway. Carlos Zapata was a good example. We actually got his military records and discovered that he had stolen valor. He said he was a combat veteran. He was not. We disclosed that he had a strip club in Florida, along with a law enforcement officer who's still working here in Shasta County. And I was threatened, you better not publish that, you'll be sorry. So it's one of those things, like, I just have learned to sort of ignore that part, just ignore it. I mean, I make sure what I'm writing is true, but I'll be sorry. What does that mean exactly? Well, in this example you just cite, that's what happens. I guess their headline was seized but not silenced, which I
Yes,
thought was an
exactly. When they were able to
awesome,
publish it, that's what they wrote.
awesome headline, seized but not silenced.
So, and I think Elizabeth is attempting to answer this question, but Lisa Schwartz said, is the public aware of what happened, and do you have local public support?
I think many of the News Cafe readers are aware. We get 100,000 unique visitors a month, believe it or not. So a lot of our readers are. We didn't write like a main story about it. I have not written a first person piece about it. George Winship, the journalist who wrote the story about a supervisor's meeting that day, mentioned it halfway through in a few paragraphs because a number of the speakers had referred to it. There's a Redding, California journalist who was assaulted at this meeting. What is the DA going to do about it? So he was compelled to mention it in his story because it had been mentioned in a meeting. And also because of the legal aspect, I'm nervous about saying too much about it. In fact, I think this is the first time I've mentioned publicly the extent of my injuries. I just said I was injured. I didn't mention the concussion or the whiplash or the ligaments. I'm new to this lawsuit stuff, so.
Les, it looks like you wanted to ask a question.
Yeah, going back to the sheriff and law enforcement's role in this, Donnie, is your sheriff or perhaps the DA connected with this constitutional sheriff's organization? I'm not sure the exact name of it, but there's a national organization. The sheriff here in El Dorado County, past sheriff, was a member. I think the new sheriff is several in rural counties of California. What about Shasta County?
Our police chief, Michael Johnson, has said he's a constitutionalist sheriff. I don't know that he's a member of the Oath Keepers. That's a whole kind of umbrella organization. But I actually wrote about that a long time ago. I said he's like walking a tightrope over a shark tank, because he's trying to live and work in this community where there are a lot of people who have very strong feelings about Second Amendment. And by the way, this is not a Republican Democrat Second Amendment thing. One of the supervisors, the sanest supervisor on the board, her name is Mary Rickert, a 71-year-old grandmother and rancher. She owns 3 gun cabinets. So this is not about whether you like guns or not, but our sheriff has said he's a constitutionalist sheriff. He said that, I think, the first day that he was sworn in, he described himself that way. So I don't know how he views that, but that's how he describes himself.
So, and by the way, the organization is called the Constitutional Sheriffs and Police Officers Association. And they basically believe that sheriffs have the ability to override any other authority in the country.
Mm-hmm. I don't know that he would take it that far. What we have seen here in Shasta County is that our ultra conservative supervisors have done away with our Dominion voting machine. And so they overruled an elected official, Kathy Darling Allen, our registrar of voters. She had a voting system that was perfectly fine. And they basically came in and told her to shut up and sit down. And now, as of now, we have no Dominion voting machines. They want to do totally hand count. And to me, that's an example of an elected official who's basically being disregarded by the ultra conservatives. So I don't know why they couldn't do that with the sheriff or the district attorney, for that matter, if they put their minds to it. I don't want to give them any ideas, but.
And this is obviously not the only thing you cover in Shasta County. So what other topics does a news cafe typically get into before all this blew up?
Well, before 3.5 years ago, we did a lot of arts and entertainment. And because I was a food writer at the paper, I did a lot of food stories. I mean, I interviewed Julia Child once. So I'm I get that thrown in my face. Why don't you go bake cupcakes or something? And I was thinking that I think my first piece that I write when I come back is this summer spaghetti salad recipe. I mean, it's just like I have to take baby steps. And, the way I look at it is even militia members eat, right? So we write about events, we write about things that happen in the city and plans. And I have one reporter, John Lewis, who writes kind of more slice of life, lighter things, and he's happy to do that. But right now, we are just, if you look at a news cafe, we're just saturated with hard news stuff that's happening. Just when you think we're in calm waters, then something else happens and gets stirred up. And so, yeah.
So there's a question here that essentially it sounds like to date, your legal remedies have been more locally focused. Is there a federal role here that might make more sense, like the FBI, for instance, that you might not be able to get attention from at the local level?
Yeah, I'm aware of that, and I'm taking steps in that direction as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, you have I know a number of things. Is there something else you want to get to?
Sure, I have lots of questions for Doni.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I think some of what we talked about in prepping for this conversation, Doni, is about intimidation and how effective it can be. And you've mentioned that in some of your answers. But one of the nuances, I think, is how to balance that intimidation with safely operating in the space. And I know you've said you're still kind of trying to think through that, but do you have journalists on staff right now who are also thinking through that and have maybe some creative or other ways to get through that process? And are there things that we, the public, could do to help in making a space safer, like showing up or?
Yeah, I think if the public showed up at meetings that seem scary, so it's not just overwhelmingly, militia members or people who are hostile, then there are witnesses, if nothing else. But I have to say, I'm the only female journalist on a news cafe, and I am treated differently. I know I am. The guys, you know, the guys are guys, and funny, the bullies don't pick on the guys, interestingly enough. So they're real brave bullies. You know, they go after I hate the description. I've been interviewed a couple of times about this, and sometimes in the when they start out, the introductions, they'll describe me as an elderly journalist, which blows my mind. But I am older. I'm 67. I'm a grandmother, you know, but I don't feel that way. But I don't think that's a reason why I should be targeted. And actually, the fact that these guys would go after somebody weaker, obviously physically weaker than them, and I refuse to I refuse to have a weapon. I have an air horn in my nightstand and wasp spray by my bed and a pepper spray gun that sprays gel pepper spray. I carry pepper spray on me, but you can't take those in meetings, you know, like in a public meeting. So I don't know. I have to think what happened to me on July 6th hopefully was an anomaly. And especially if there are legal recourses, that maybe it will send a signal to others, like, you know, maybe you shouldn't, you know, rough up a journalist at a meeting. Maybe that's not a good idea because you might be having some legal ramifications because of that.
Yeah, Doni, that reminds me, you mentioned Carlos Zapata, and he had a restraining order placed against him and some, at least, of his guns taken away, and we haven't heard from him for a while. So do you think that that's an effective way to move forward?
Yeah, I don't know. He's been very quiet lately, but the guy who ran this meeting, I consider of him like Carlos Jr., Carlos Zapata Jr. He looks just like him. They all kind of were the swarthy look, the baseball caps, you know, the merch that has, you know, flags and, you know, machine guns and stuff. But yeah, when Carlos Zapata had a restraining order taken out against him, there was not one law enforcement agent at Shasta County who would serve him. So the attorney had to find a woman who works for her to serve him. And there's nobody who believes that when the sheriffs did show up at his house that all his weapons were confiscated. No way. So it feels unbalanced here. And also there's the other thing is you don't know which law enforcement you can trust.
Really?
Like if you could take off all their shirts and see their tattoos, then you'd know where they stand, if they have swastikas or white pride or whatever. But you don't know. They show up in a uniform and you don't know who you're dealing with.
Totally. And there's been statements, somebody mentioned getting the FBI involved, and I know you were
Right.
talking about that, but we've heard some of that ultra conservative group say that they work out with the FBI.
Absolutely.
So
So it's frightening. You feel like, should they have like a little something on their lapel that tells you that they're trustworthy? We have written stories that have taken out at least 2 deputies who were, you know, had all this hate speech and white supremacist stuff on their websites. Sheriff deputies who were supposedly guarding the supervisors' meetings, they no longer work for the sheriff's department, which also doesn't make us any more popular with that group, because those are their friends.
So there've been a number of questions along the lines of it basically is Sarah Forward is focused on a pretty broad geographic range, the Siskiyou and Sierra Nevada mountains, you know, from the Oregon border down to Inyo County, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of alt-right groups throughout that region. And so the questions are, you know, what are the warning signs and what should people be looking for? You know, and are there code words or, you know, what, you know, basically, how do we try to prevent this from happening in our communities?
Well, there are code words. It's like their dog whistle: freedom, patriots, family, God, and country. They throw those around. Not that I don't believe in any of those things, but watch the elections. Watch the elections, watch who's running for office, and start backing people who are sane alternatives. And here, I will say one thing that these guys have done for Shasta County is it's brought together the sane people. There's a recall movement of one of our horrible supervisors here, and the recallers are made up of Democrats, Republicans, you know, they run the gamut politically. And so And Mary Rickert, as I mentioned, is she was a Reagan Republican. So it's brought together people who are just moderate people who are not extremists, who don't want to kill anybody, who don't want to take over anything. They just want to live peacefully, but they have to be tough. You have to be tough to run for office and endure the kind of abuse. There was a guy, his name was David Kehoe, who used to be on the Shasta County Board of Supervisors. He was considered an eloquent, statesmanly, like, very articulate, and he wrote a letter in support of this recall. And at one of the supervisors meetings, somebody got up and just started hurling horrible, slanderous things about him that I won't even repeat. And the supervisor, the chair, sat there with his gavel and just smiled and let it go. So a normal person would go, well, holy cow, if that could happen to him, if that could happen to somebody of his caliber, then man, count me out. I'm not going to run for office. I'm not going to write a letter to the editor. I'm not going to speak up, So the intimidation factor is big. So just, I think before it gets as bad as it is in Shasta County, where we have a majority of alt-right on the board, do something. We have lost our health officer. We've had a perfectly decent supervisor recalled for no good reason. People are fleeing Shasta County. We've lost, CEOs, county councils. One of the CEOs was basically blackmailed into quitting. So the atmosphere here is, it's pretty awful. So if you can catch it before it gets that far, and get candidates who are moderate, who are strong, and join arms together and walk together, because if you're singled out alone, that's dangerous. So get people together who are like-minded that way. I think that's the only way to counteract this.
And by the way, I put it in the chat. It's recallkevincry.org. I put it in there because we've endorsed that campaign and contributed to it. So
congratulations!
In full disclosure,
it's a nonpartisan recall. Yeah, it's a nonpartisan recall. So yeah, and this guy, he's friends with Mike Lindell, like they're pals now. He's flown over on the county money to see him. So yeah, those are the kind of people they're bringing into Shasta County, the kind of influence they have.
So Michael Taylor had an interesting question. What's the role of social media in either supporting or undermining the principles of an independent press? I mean, so how does social media in general impact?
Social media is huge. It can be the best of times and the worst of times, right? If you can only go, like, I can't see all the militia guys post. Sometimes there'll be a mole in a group and they'll send out things, but they'll say blatant lies about things and you have no way of even knowing they're happening, and certainly no way of contradicting it or standing up for yourself or disputing it. And then on News Cafe, we use social media a lot as well, but everybody does it. And then I can see why people feel sort of like they're overwhelmed by too much media, too many stories. They're tired of negative stories. I hear that a lot. I've had today, I saw we lost a subscriber and she said, I just can't take it. No offense, you're doing a good job, but I can't take one more negative story. And by negative, they mean telling what's happening.
I feel that way sometimes too.
Yeah, I do too. I want to go write about spaghetti salad,
Well, I think, Doni, I mean, just as someone who ran for office and is still active in electoral politics and trying to recruit people to run for office, like what we're recruiting for now is not candidates who are going to stand up and do something in their role. We're recruiting candidates to stand up against fascism and ultra right wingism, right? Like it's a very different role than school board 5 years ago.
Oh yeah.
And so I just, the recruitment process has got to look a little different also.
Yeah, I'm not involved in recruiting, but I hear about a lot of candidates or wannabe candidates, and they often will back out because look how much business is not being done when that is your job, to push against that kind of extremism. You know, we have Shasta County has a huge homeless problem, fentanyl problem, housing shortages. We have so many real problems, and then meeting after meeting is taken up by this kind of circus atmosphere, where people getting up and speaking about things that have nothing to do with here, that are not under the purview of the supervisors. They'll talk about President Trump. You know, it's like they can't stay on topic, and so I feel like we're just spinning our wheels, and things are getting worse. And meanwhile, people are leaving Shasta County in droves. There's a brain drain here. Finding a doctor here is very difficult. People have, you know, waiting lists. I don't know what people who have serious medical conditions do. I really don't. So it has an effect. And the other side is delighted. They say things like, hey, people are watching us all across the world. They want to be just like us. And then they invite those people, hey, if you like what we're saying, if you like the way we think, come to Shasta County. So while in Shasta County, it's like this door where people leaving are the ones who say, I've had it. And the ones coming in or say, sign me up. I'm going to join the militia. You know, I want to be part of this. So pretty soon, I feel like this is teeter-totter and the balance is off.
Really?
Well, and by the way,
Really?
Don Urbanus thinks that you should write a book, by the way. That would be a broader audience. There's probably a book in there.
Oh, I'm sure there is. Yeah.
All right, Les, you had a question.
Carly, yeah, obviously the alt-right is well organized and is
Yeah.
spreading, and they communicate with one another, they coordinate with one another. What about on our side, your side? Are there other outlets like a news cafe? Are there what else is going on in the region? You know, we're talking about 20 counties in the mountains and foothills and adjacent valleys. Any coordination? Is anybody to work with? I guess is the question.
Not much. You know, we have the Record Searchlight owned by USA Today. We have the TV station, which is owned by Sinclair Broadcasting. There's another online site called Shasta Scout, and she writes more news based. She doesn't do opinions, so I don't know that she's kind of come under fire, you know, but it's pretty slim up here. Like when you were mentioning the other side, they've got money, they're organized, you know, they have meetings, they're passionate. And I don't know what happened with the more moderate progressive side. I don't know if people are tired or scared, or they've given up and they think it's hopeless. I don't know. I just know people are sick of it. And you know, the big saying about make America great again, a lot of people here say, just make Shasta County sane again. You know, we weren't perfect. Shasta County was never perfect, you know, but oh man, I long for the days when it was just, you know, just regular people, and we didn't have all this huge flags, you know, big trucks bombing around with big Trump 2024 flags. And it's very intimidating to live here, I gotta say.
Well, on that sad note, I'm going to turn it back over to Elizabeth to wrap this up. So go ahead, take it away, Elizabeth.
Okay, thank you, Carly. So I do, you know, there was a comment in the chat about why stay here. I mean, I think the question about why stay anywhere, right? Rural America has been disinvested in for decades. There are challenges everywhere of climate, wildfire, broadband access, education, healthcare access. I mean, this is another chapter in the story of rural America that is more chaotic at the moment than in other places, I think. But there is a strong contingent of folks who believe that we can pull it back.
Yeah.
Doni, you mentioned the recall group. And we have, so I actually am the chair of the Democratic Central Committee here in Shasta County. And we have folks who are dedicating almost a full-time suite of hours weekly to that effort, and really making some good progress there. And so if folks want to help in making a difference there, you know, coming up to help in canvas and gathering signatures, contributing money to the recall campaign is incredibly helpful.
Registering people to vote, you know.
Yes.
That's huge.
Registering people vote. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're thinking a lot more about the young people up here too. There are
Yes.
some pretty stupendous jobs in this area, and with the evolution from the pandemic of the work from home space, like that's a real opportunity. We see that as an opportunity to recruit more folks up here. And so, you know, I think there are points of light, and this is a really tragic and horrifying chapter in Shasta County. Certainly not the only one in the Western US in our history, but piquant because we're living it.
Yeah.
So yeah, Doni, I just really appreciate how you're helping us to chronicle this and helping us to walk through it. And if you have anything you'd like to say in closing, I would invite you. Yeah.
Well, I believe in those points of light. And if I didn't, I wouldn't keep doing what I'm doing. And this is a dark season. That's the way I look at it. I hope this is just a season and we'll look back later and say, gosh, remember that time? And I refuse to leave. My sister is here. My grandchildren are here. My home is here. My garden is here. And I've been here since I was 5 years old. And I was here first. A lot of these people the militia people, a lot of them are newcomers who've planted their stake in the ground and claimed it. Well, I've been here for a long time, and it's my home, and I'm not going to be intimidated to leave my home. That's how I stand today on August 17th, 2023. That's where I am today.
Well, and you're being recorded, so we've got it down on tape here. At any rate,
Okay.
with that, I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you to all who have attended this. Thanks again to the donors who are supporting our effort to put this forward. And by the way, we have 2 more upcoming these town halls on. It's Thursday, September 14th. We're going to have Stuart Stevens from the Lincoln Project. Talking about their work to shed some light. And then in October 26th, we're going to have the Rural Urban Bridge Initiative, which is kind of about trying to not have these extremisms of urban versus rural. That there seems to be a divide. So stay tuned to if you're not on our email list, sign up for our email list and you'll get notices of those events as well as these town halls that we'll be doing in the future.
I appreciate the work you're doing. It's important work.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you for that. And with that, I'm going to bring it to a close. Thank you all for participating. We look forward to seeing you at our next town hall.
Cool.